Greetings. Do without wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Walk Magick video. Today I'm going to be exploring the present day, my perspective of existence via the three Thelemic deities in the Book of the Law, probably some mentions of the Holy Guardian Angel, and it's going to be in a very unconventional type of way. Yes, I'll be using quotes from the Book of the Law to back up what I'm saying and give my perspective without trying to comment on the Book of the Law itself necessarily. Just speaking on, I guess, how I live seeing and experiencing Nuit, Hadit, and Heru-Ra-Ha on a daily basis. And what prompted this video was that I was sitting on my stoop the other day, and I don't even really know how to begin this video as I'm off script. I'm just kind of going off the cuff, and I'm going to try not to rant so much, but I think that this is important. So I pay a lot of attention to global current events and US politics, and this is not going to be a video about much of those topics at all. I want to stick to Thelemic occultism as much as possible, but if we're analyzing the universe and we're analyzing what's going on in society on a human level, on a spiritual level, on a mental level, I think there's no getting around mentioning taking perspectives on what's going on around me at this time and how I see the Thelemic deities at work regardless of world events, right? So without further ado, I'm just going to dive in. Let's begin. So, Nuit, infinite space, goddess of the night sky, right? If you look at the magician's tables, she's listed as the path of Binah, but also the path of Ayn, the number 0. So right off the bat, what I could say about Nuit is there's something very interesting about that. She is the manifest, personified, feminine aspect of the universe, the yin half of the yang, right? So infinite space, let's first tackle what is infinite space. Is that just related to our singular universe? Is that related to a potentiality of multiple universes? Is there a boundary on this universe? And if so, what is outside of that boundary? Right? It's like scientifically we don't have answers, but we can, if we really meditate upon the symbols laid out in occultism over the past couple thousands of years, we can glean a lot more than science can give us concrete answers based on empirical fact. So even if there is a boundary on our singular universe, there would have to still be a void of nothingness, right? So there's the void of space, but even that space is considered space, so it's a thing. So there would have to be an absence of space outside of space. And so let's just start with, is there a singular universe? So if that's the case, well then this infinite universe that we exist in, there could potentially be no end in all directions of this singular universe. There's also the potentiality that there is a non-space outside of space-time, in which case Nuit would extend to that also. And if there's multiple universes, they would either have to exist on some other plane or dimension where the universes could not interact with one another, or superimposed on top of each other, though invisible to one another. Or they could exist in their own self-contained bubbles, just far enough from each other that they'll never actually interact, even if they just kept on expanding due to dark matter. And Nuit would extend to all of those simultaneously. That would still be, so if there's infinite universes, then she would still be all of that infinite space, just on and on. Nuit, her whole concept is being the mother. Now, here's where I get into some world events, right? So, there's a lot of calamities on the planet Earth being a human being. There's poverty, there's sickness, there are many hardships that we face on a daily basis, right? There's war breaking out all over the planet right now. People maimed, dying, right? And war has existed as long as humans have been building societies and trying to take over more territory from other people. And, so there's always been sickness, there's always been disease. The mother wants to care for you in any given situation. And I'll get into the illusion of the body, the illusion of physical reality in a moment. But for the time being, Nuit really is on this first level that I'm talking about. Matter and space, all static objects, everything external to you. And to another person's perspective, you are Nuit to them, right? So even though we use our body to do will, right? Like for instance, I have a cup of tea on my table. That's a static object. It needs me to interact with it for it to do something. Otherwise, it will just sit there, or it will evaporate, and it will just do what it does statically, right? There are certain laws of physics that govern it, and it will not move unless I pick this cup up and move it, right? So from my perspective, that cup of tea is a part of the body of Nuit. Any other person that I interact with, their bodily matter is a base matter, a physical matter that I can interact with. How I choose to interact with that will create karmas. Right? To another person's perspective, my bodily matter is static, and they interact with me. Therefore, I'm Nuit to another person's perspective. Now, in all of these interactions, really what Nuit wants from you is to let you experience happiness and joy. She wants you to be happy. Just like any mother wants their child to be happy. We are the byproduct of Nuit. Nuit as Binah births the universe. The Great Mother births the universe. That's the first aspect, right? And so she nurtures. She's the nurturer. She is a coddling force, a loving force. How do you experience joy given states of disease and, states of calamity, war, right? All these things. You have to get past the bodily aspect. You have to see that there's an interplay at work, and that's where we're going to get into Hadit momentarily. There's always the interplay. Where there's Nuit, there's also Hadit, and these two forces interacting with each other. But like I said, Nuit wants us to be happy. So that's her main goal. Everything that we do is unto Nuit, right? She says in the book of the law that the rituals ever be unto me, or expect the direful judgments of Ra-hoor-khuit. Again, this is just my interpretations, right? What does that actually mean? Well, it means to consciously go about your day realizing that everything that you interact with in the physical universe is a component of Nuit. Whatever rituals, magical rituals you do, you're doing them unto Nuit by interacting with physical matter, by interacting with space outside of yourself. And you're a force of will. You're a force of energy, of motion, of word, gesture. All these components are the opposite of that static quality of passiveness. They are assertive, they are active. So Nuit is the receiver of all those actions. So my perspective of let the ritual ever be unto me is to go about your day, day by day, every single day, being conscious of the fact that what you do is unto Nuit. Right? That's Nuit in a nutshell. I'll come back to her momentarily. Hadit. Hadit is the center of the universe, and I've said this in many other videos. So if the universe is infinite, regardless if there's one or many universes, however space-time extends or stops extending, and then there's anti-space, whatever is outside of the universe, if there is an outside of the universe, irrelevant. If it's infinite, where is the center? Can there be a center of infinity? In my opinion, no. Because any point that you pick then becomes the center from that point. So Hadit simultaneously exists in all points. Hadit simultaneously exists in all points. Hadit is... So let's look at his image. So originally in Egyptian mythology, I believe it's called the Wedget, right? And it was the winged solar disk. And it was always depicted on steles being the soul of man leaving the body and ascending back into Nuit. So when Hadit says, the Qabs is the name of my house, the Qabs is in the coup, right? What he's saying then is, he is that spark of divinity within the heart center, within the star, because the heart is symbolic of the ego, or the ruach, the intellectual part of the soul. So that's centered in Tifereth. Tifereth is the center of that. So how I interpret it is that Hadit is like that point of light, that spark of the highest part of the soul, if you will, that exists in the center of one's being symbolically. So the center of my being, approximately, as the heart center, is Hadit. So when you hear, think with your heart, act with your heart, right? I always think of Hadit in that sense. So Hadit is always aspiring to Nuit. He is the force of energy, the force of motion, the force of will behind your actions. Now again, if Hadit is the center of space, and if the center of space is everywhere, any point that you pick is the center of space in infinite space, it really breaks down the division between the two. Nuit says, I'm divided for love's sake at the chance of union. There's something interesting. So she wants to come into union with Hadit, and as conscious beings, we are agents acting on behalf of Hadit, the father, assertive, active, yang component. Nuit being divided for love's sake, what does that mean? So, as I said at the beginning, Nuit is the path of Binah, but she's also the path of zero, Ain, nothing, no thing. Right? Binah being the negative component, and Hadit being the active or positive component. That negative component has a lot more in common with the nothingness, the no thing, than the positive component. So that circle, right? That circle of the number zero, the nothingness, that infinite component, beyond Kether, beyond the light that creates, that gives life, that source of nothingness from whence something came. The feminine has more in common with that. If you look at the yoni and you look at the lingam, the yoni is a cavernous, we'll say void-like space, right? And that has a lot more in common with the ayin, the nothing. So that zero became the one, that nothing became the one, and there's no describing necessarily how to bridge that gap from nothing to something. There is no words I can utter on this recording to describe how that nothing becomes something, other than there was perhaps some kind of consciousness or anti-consciousness or something beyond words, beyond description, that then became something. And that something then became divided. So if we look at like concepts of like the Tao Te, right? It's a thing beyond description. Omnipresent, omnipotent, but not perceptible. And so that imperceptible thing is what became divided into the two. So Nuit identifies with that nothingness, that passive nothingness. And so then Hadit also becomes that number one. And if you look at the magician's tables, Hadit is listed on path 1. Path 1, so there again you have the yoni as the 0 and the lingam as the straight line, the number 1. That circle and that extended line, right? So we have that symbolic in our number system of present day, the English based on Arabic numerals. So there's something interesting already. We have this positive and this negative. Now Hadit identifies himself in several ways right at the beginning of the Book of the Law. Quote, "I am the magician and the exorcist. I am the axle of the wheel and the cube in the circle. Come unto me is a foolish word, for it is I that go." End quote. So being the magician and the exorcist, the magician is one who casts their will, right? We could look at Crowley's definition of magic. The science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. That is what a magician does. They cause changes to occur in conformity with their will. They practice that art and science of using their will to enact change. And every single change that takes place creates some type of karma, some type of action. The exorcist is one that dispels demonic forces. But also, if you look at the etymology of the word exorcist, it comes from the Greek word exorcistes, meaning to bind under oath. So the exorcist, in that sense, is one that uses words to enact change upon themselves, or to charge an oath unto something, to bind something. So, like the magus of AA, one who speaks the logos of God, they're speaking truth to enslave humanity according to Liber Bibel Magi. Being the exorcist is to utter some type of word which then causes things to obey, right? So that's what Hadit does. He's like a manifestation of that logos in that sense. He's the magician using one's will to enact change. And the cube in the circle is a very interesting concept. And there could be many, many different interpretations. Like, it doesn't say square. If it was square, it'd be a lot more simple. When I hear cube, I often think of the cube of space. And so the cube of space is everything, the 22 paths manifest as the physical universe, with Saturn in the center. And so in that center is the most physical, densest point, where all of those lines, their energy of all the lines are converging upon one another, their energy. And so Hadit being the center of that space, the center of that cube, right? He's the cube in the circle. Well, again, you have that circle representing infinity. So there's an infinite component. So the cube in the circle. And if he's the cube in the circle, it implies that he is the cube and the circle, which again comes down to that center point in infinite space, that center being everywhere. Even if it's outside of the physical universe, even if we go into astral space, even if we go into spaces beyond the astral. He is literally that force of motion. So as I said, my cup of tea is a static object. It needs my will to pick it up and drink from it in order for it to do its function. However, left long enough, particles will start evaporating the liquid inside, so it will just become an empty cup with some dried up substance stained on the inside of the cup eventually. And given long enough, either those stained particles will continue to degrade, the cup itself will continue to degrade, which would take a lot of time, but eventually everything does decay. So Hadid also says at the beginning of the book, I am life and the giver of life. So energy, motion, the semen coming out of the phallus, entering the great mother who births the universe. He is life and the giver of life. Yet therefore is the knowledge of me and the knowledge of death. So right here we have that example. So this static cup, left to its own devices, will still go through a state of motion where it will degrade over time and its particles will change. So that's one thing about nature, is that nature is in a constant state of flux. It is always changing. There was a quote on a Rosicrucian poster that we have upstairs of the Rosicrucian temple, the invisible basilica. And the quote is part of the quote is along the lines of nature unchangeable. And so what I'm trying to say is nature is unchangeable because it's in a constant state of change. What doesn't change about nature is that it's always going to change. Nature does not stop changing. So it has an unchangeable, changing nature. Nature has an unchangeable, changing nature, if you will. And so that's Hadid as well, knowing that things are going to degrade. And contemplating one's death, knowing that this physical body is going to dissolve eventually. It is going to shut down and stop functioning. This is a temporary vehicle for my spirit, in which Hadid is housing and using as a vehicle for will at this moment, gives great joy. So now we could get back to, okay, so we're living in a time where proto-fascism is taking over, and it's failing in some places and coming to rise back in power in other places. And without getting into too many specifics, it's just people are going crazy right now for many reasons. I should probably do a video on the state of the collective consciousness at some point, but I don't want to rant too much into that. But I do think that the solution to those problems is not necessarily going out and trying to fix all of them at once, or relying on our leaders, rather, to go out and fix them. It's rather just fixing ourselves and understanding that the interplay of Nuit and Hadid is one of constant joy and is nothing but a game. And so when you could start to see life not from, okay, I'm going to experience physical discomforts in times of war, or in times of poverty, or in times of starvation, or in times of ecological degradation, which is also happening and is pretty fucking scary. Knowing that that is a necessary part of the interplay of Nuit and Hadid, and that they are causing changes to occur at all times, and that this is just a stepping stone to what's coming next. And when you could really trust in your mother and know that she's providing for you and giving us what we need, not only as an individual, but as a species, well, there comes a relaxation that, yeah, my body may be uncomfortable, but I'm not my body, ultimately. I'm just a part of the whole. I'm a conscious part of the whole that can experience things, and for that, you treat your body, mind with the greatest respect, and you try to shape them and do the best you can with them. Learn, educate, strength train, exercise, stay healthy, try to experience longevity of life. But the body's going to die, and so we're just components of Nuit and Hadid having their love intercourse throughout infinite space. That helps ease a lot of the tensions of discomfort, and you could really get through anything. You could get through any pain with that perspective. It actually makes the feeling of carrying a burden a lot lighter. So I like to live in a sort of bhakti state where, yes, there's times I have to do my will, I have to rely on Hadid, and there's times I have to let the mother provide for me. And so it's knowing when to act and when to be still, when to manifest, when to be patient. Things are always changing, and so how I try to do things is just look for the opportunities and act accordingly. If you understand yourself as an individual, and here we're getting now into Ra-hoor-khuit. When you understand yourself as an individual, when you know your nature, you know what your will is, it makes it easy to see the opportunities that you need to let pass by and the opportunities that you need to spring upon. So the interplay of Nuit and Hadid create a child. Not just simultaneously. I was going to say not just the physical universe, but simultaneously the physical universe and the personification of the deity Heru-Ra-Ha. And at a certain point, I don't see a distinction between the physical universe and Heru-Ra-Ha. Heru-Ra-Ha has the active and passive component. So the glyphs of Nuit as infinite space is a circle, and the glyph of Hadid as the center of space is a single point. And when you put the single point in the center of the circle, you get the glyph of the sun. Bam! You have the manifest universe. The sun as a symbol of Keter, the sun as a life-giving force of our planet, allowing conscious life to exist and thrive. But you also get a glyph of that infinite universe. And you get a glyph of where your consciousness is in the center of that universe. You are that point in the center of the circle, and you are that circle. You are the glyph of the sun. So there's a lot to contemplate there. Now, Ra-hoor-khuit. I had a very interesting thought relating to karma. So things are constantly changing. And when we act, when we do our wills, we are interacting with physical matter, sometimes with other people, sometimes with non-sentient beings, non-sentient objects, rather. Regardless of every single thing that you do, karma is action. There are good and bad karmas, and in my opinion, there is a state beyond karma or that causes karma, but that one doesn't have to necessarily be consciously, how could I say it, consciously affected by it. You're going to be bodily affected by it, but you don't have to be disturbed by it. What I mean by that is every act that you do is going to cause change. Every action you take is going to cause change. Hadid acting upon Nuit is causing the evolution of the universe. Particles are interchanging with other particles, and that is creating new compounds to rearrange themselves into new shapes and forms as the universe changes, as nature changes. And so that active and passive is also Heru-Ra-Ha. There is the still component and there is the motion component, symbolized by the sign of the Enterer, thrusting forward, and the sign of silence, passively awaiting to see what's going to happen. Being silent, an infinite potential. At any given moment, you could do anything within your sphere of interactivity. Wherever you are right now hearing this, you can choose to interact with any single thing around you, or nothing at all. And whatever you do is going to cause something to happen, or cause something not to happen, which still causes other things to happen in its place. Right? Like I said, my cup of tea, I could either choose to drink it or let it sit there and evaporate. Either way, I'm making a conscious choice that is causing a karma, an action to happen by my decisions. Whether I'm conscious of that fact or not, I'm causing something to happen. So you basically have to know what your needs are and only act upon your needs at a given moment. Sure, you could act upon your wants once in a while, but there's going to be a karma attached to that. And so you need to know, doing your will is positioning yourself based on the knowledge of your nature to choose in your limited time in this body what the best experiences are for you and setting yourself up to try to experience those experiences. Choosing what you do to experience the experiences that you need to have this incarnation. What lessons do you need to learn? What are you lacking in? What are you already good at? what calls to you, what aversions do you have, all of that is critical knowledge to you doing your will. And nobody is not susceptible to karma, which is very interesting. And so I had a thought, it's like people every single day, especially people who are corrupted already for whatever reason, they've had a hard life, they haven't experienced any education, whatever the case is, people act on their lower base instincts on an every single day basis. They lie, they steal, they want more, they abuse people, they abuse the surroundings, the environment. There's any number of people causing any number of abuses. And for whatever reason, all of those things are necessary for the evolution of this nature, this universe, or at least this little small part of the universe that we're existing on together. And people think I could get away with that. If I just take this when nobody's looking, I could get away with that. And I'm going to tell you, no, nobody gets away with anything. You think karma takes time to manifest. No, it takes time to feel the effects of your karma sometimes. Sometimes it happens instantaneously. But sometimes it just takes a little time to feel it. Nuit and Hadit acting upon one another instantly causes that child to be born. That child being born is the karma that you carry. Heru-Ra-Ha is the bringer of that karma. You know, he's a god of war and vengeance. I will deal hardly with them. It's like, whatever you do, especially if it's not aligned, whatever you do, if it's not aligned with your will, is going to bring about a learning lesson, right? And so I look at karma like this. You go somewhere and you get exposed to a germ. You don't feel sick right away, but you're already carrying that germ in your system. It's now incubating and spreading, and in a matter of hours or days, you're going to feel the effects of getting exposed to that germ because you went somewhere where there was a germ. That's a lot like karma. You do something, and you carry the seed of that karma already in your system. It might take a tiny bit of time to come to fruition sometimes, but that plant is going to grow. That karma is going to manifest. When you do something, that action causes things to happen on an internal level and an external level. Liber Zadi has some very interesting passages that are very easily misunderstood right at the beginning. And so I'll just read it instead of trying to quote from memory. I am not come to rebuke you or to enslave you. I bid you not turn from your voluptuous ways, from your idleness, from your follies. But I bring you joy to your pleasure, peace to your languor, wisdom to your folly. All that ye do is right, if so be that ye enjoy it. I am come against sorrow, against weariness, against them that seek to enslave you. There's a lot there. So it's kind of, on one level, yes, you could do anything you feel you need to, and it's either going to be in accordance with your true will, or it's not. Heru-Ra-Ha-khuit in this case is saying, no, go ahead. Don't turn from your voluptuous ways, from your idleness, from your follies. But I'm going to bring you wisdom to your folly. What does that mean? That means you're going to fucking bump your head against the goddamn wall doing the wrong fucking thing. And you're going to eventually learn, because now we're in the aeon of the child. We are now entered a growing up phase. And I've heard this saying many times. It's like, let go or be dragged. And our species is not letting go at all. They are not turning away from their voluptuous ways, from their idleness, from their follies. There are any number of problems that need systematic change on an internal level. I'm not even getting into the global shit. Just on an internal level, you know, people off themselves with toxic foods on a daily basis. People off themselves in any number of ways. People cause themselves any number of mental health crises that could have been avoided had they just fixed their shit. And granted, yes, there are mental health cases that are not fixable, that need either therapy or need medication to cope with chemical disruptions in the brain. All of that is valid. But then there are people who just take a fucking hammer and hit themselves in the head repeatedly and are like, I wonder why my fucking head hurts. And it's like, well, you're going to learn, don't fucking hit yourself in the head with a hammer. That's what Ra-hoor-khuit is telling you. It's kind of goading, if you misunderstand the words here, it's goading you thinking, oh, I can do whatever I want. No, you're bound by the law of Thelemic. Thelemic is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, meaning you need to fucking know your goddamn nature and act accordingly. If you're not introspecting, if you're not analyzing on a daily basis the actions you've taken, and if they're in accordance with your will based on your nature, well then you're doing something wrong and you're going to learn from that eventually. It might take a couple of incarnations, and the rest of us will have to deal with your goddamn stupidity as you figure out how to act accordingly, but you're going to learn from it. And so that's a necessary part of the evolution of this temporary species that we're existing as together. And this is going to lead to something else, it's going to lead to something else. Energy is going to go on. The energy is already here. It's going to continue to change shapes and forms. I'm not so attached to the human species in a way that I think we're going to live forever. We've been around for, like 0.01% of time that this universe has been in existence, right? Realistically, we're not going to be here forever as this species. But this is a cool experience, and it could be so much fucking better if we would just conform to the laws of nature. Now, a couple of other quotes before I close. Now, first let it be understood that I am a god of war and vengeance. I shall deal hardly with them. Choose ye an island, fortify it, dung it about with enginery of war. I will give you a war engine. With it ye shall smite the peoples, and none shall stand before you. Lurk, withdraw upon them. This is the law of the battle of conquest. Thus shall my worship be about my secret house. Sometimes you need to defend yourself. If you find yourself in a position of leadership and you have a tyrant on the rise trying to do harm to you and other innocents, yes, in that case you need to fight, and you need to fight a just cause. Sometimes you're walking down the street and there might be some crazy person with a chip on their shoulder that wants to just attack you because they're psychotic. Yes, you need to defend yourself in those cases. This is not saying to go out and attack people. This is not necessarily saying to do harm to anyone. Heru-Ra-Ha is already dealing with assholes, for lack of a better term. So I don't need to worry about assholes. Sometimes stars are going to collide with one another. Even if I'm doing my will, those who are not doing their will may be prone to bump into me. I could absorb the experience, allow it to change me accordingly as I need to allow it to change me, and then just keep it moving. I don't even have to be mad. It was just a necessary component of Nuit and Hadit, interacting with one another, and Ra-hoor-khuit is going to deal with that person and hopefully sooner rather than later bring them wisdom to their folly, and they're going to learn from that interaction, right? Choose ye an island, fortify it, dung it about with enginery of war. I exist in my own little bubble on a daily basis. I'm very aware of what's going on in the world around me. Does it affect me on a physical, mental level, emotional level? Sometimes, yes, very much so. Sometimes I get very angry just seeing, unnecessary calamities that we inflict upon ourselves that could have easily been avoided had we just done something else, right? Sometimes that gets to me. But I've chosen my island. I have so many protective amulets placed around me. I have specific sacred imagery tattooed on my body as part of my protection. Those are instruments of my enginery of war. I live in an apartment with almost 20 steles in the apartment. Later it goes on to say right after Thus shall my lurk withdraw upon them. This is the law of the battle of conquest. Thus shall my worship be about my secret house. Get the stele of revealing itself. Set it in thy secret temple. And that temple is already a right disposed. That temple is already a right disposed. The world is our temple. The body is our individual temple. Right? So I have those sacred, whatever path you're on, even if you're not into Thelema necessarily, whatever sacred objects you have around you are protections. Every time you see them, it affects your consciousness. There are energies attached to those symbols through many connotations and many uses by many, many people over the years. Those objects carry those energies. They are instruments of power. Okay? So if nobody's breaking into my bubble, my little island, I don't have a problem. People could be as crazy as they want, and whatever Nuit and Hadit need me to experience, sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes I do what I want to do anyway, just because I'm human and I want to have a little sense of instant gratification and pleasure, right? I get my ass kicked from that sometimes, but that's fine too. But as long as nobody's breaking onto my island, my little bubble's protected, you know? I know how to protect my little sacred space. So, wherever you are, you could either choose to stay there or go somewhere else. But I really suggest everybody look at their own little personal space as their own little personal space. My personal space is not governed necessarily by certain laws of man. My little sacred space is governed by laws that I've accepted, laws outlined in the book of the law, laws of nature, laws that I've observed myself by meditating upon the physical and spiritual universe that I exist in. Those are the laws that govern my little sacred island that I've chosen and that I've fortified. And so living in that little sacred space with the instruction of Heru-Ra-Ha, one, I make videos so I could still influence the external world to a minor extent through things like the internet or whatever, or interactions when I step outside of my little island to interact with friends, family, etc. But when I'm in my island, you know, the only thing that's really getting changed in that space is me. So I have my little sacred space to work upon myself, to be the best self that I can bring to the table at any given time. Now this brings me to another point, and this will probably be like the closing pieces because I think it's very interesting to the human experience. Quote, "Fear not at all. Fear neither men nor fates, nor gods nor anything. Money fear not, nor laughter of the folk folly, nor any other power in heaven or upon the earth or under the earth. New is your refuge as Hadit your light, and I am the strength, force, vigor of your arms." So right there, Ra-hoor-khuit, Heru-Ra-Ha, Iowa is dictating the words of the crown-conquering child, is telling you, don't be so attached to the outcome, right? Don't lust after results. Whatever you need to experience this incarnation, you're going to experience. Whatever things you do are going to dictate further what experiences you're going to need to experience. Every act that we take changes not just our surroundings, but the entire universe. Look at it like this, right? If you have two lines that start at one point and go at a 1 degree angle, at the beginning, those lines are very, very, very close together. Almost imperceptibly close. But if you extend that 1 degree angle on and on and on and on and on, those lines get pretty far apart. So anything that has particles that causes a change on this plane, one, we're affecting the physical universe. Two, we're affecting the astral light, and the astral light is further going to affect a million billion different things. So one simple action, making a sound and allowing those waves to bounce across the room, or interacting with any number of things in the air, in the ether. Every action you take, it might be a very small, minuscule action, but that 1 degree line, 2 lines that start at a 1 degree angle, well, as that change goes on and on and on, it creates a pretty big ripple effect down the line through space-time later on. So we affect, what I'm trying to say is, the whole universe. But don't be afraid. It's like everything is a necessary component to what's coming next. Everything is just a love affair of Nuit and Hadit, and Heru-Ra-Ha is simply the end result of that, the here and now. A side note, the sun, like I said, the circle and the point, I already explained that. That's a glyph of the sun. The sun being the center of our solar system. I was looking at color theory and trying to meditate in a more spiritual context. The sun is the color white. We perceive it as yellow because of the ozone layer. And if you've seen images of the sun in yellow and red, it's because that's thermal imaging cameras that have taken those photos and they're picking up heat signatures. The sun is not actually red and yellow, it's blazing white. And white, we know, is the symbol of Kether. So the sun being the symbol of that divine light, and Ra-hoor-khuit being associated and corresponding directly with the sun, he becomes an agent of that divine light. So keep in mind, the divine light is always working in the here and now, and you could always see that in all things. Beyond Nuit and Hadit, they are still personifications, manifestations of that divine light. Try to look through existence. Look past the physicality around you, and you could see that divine light in all things, in yourself and in the objects, space, and non-space beyond space. That light is here, and it's causing things to occur. It is the source of creation. It is that no thing from whence nothing created something. Right? It is that closest thing to that source of nothingness. So we don't really have anything to worry about. It's like everything is literally, in that sense, a game. However, don't take that as an excuse to go out and do whatever you want, because that is going to cause changes, and then you're going to have to deal with those changes. As I said, there's still laws in place as long as you have a physical body, a mental body, and a spiritual body. There are different components to the soul. There is the lowest part of the soul, there is the highest part of the soul, and there are mediators between that. This higher and lower soul, as long as you have even a soul, and that soul is attached to a body, you're going to experience things. And the actions you take today are going to dictate whether our species is going to experience, a nice state of enlightenment and pleasure tomorrow, or a state of suffering and continued need of growth in the days to come. And so that's what Heru-Ra-Ha is guiding us towards. So it's like, whatever's necessary is going to happen. People are not going to become enlightened in a fucking week. And a lot of people, there's, almost 9 billion people on the planet at this point. Probably 90% of them are going to continue to ignore what occultists and spiritual, actual masters, not what some fucking preacher in the pulpit is telling you out of the goddamn Bible that they don't even understand themselves. No, what masters have been saying for thousands upon thousands of years at this point. Not everybody's going to wake up and come to terms with that in a week from now. So there's going to be plenty of mistakes. There's going to be plenty of unnecessary pain and hardships ahead. There's going to be a lot of calamity coming our way as a species in the years to come. But that's necessary, because if any of the human species survives, they'll learn from that. a weeding out of the weeds, a watering of the flowers. That's what's going to be necessary, because people don't want to make the necessary changes right now to be a more better, understanding, wise person, right? So people are going to continue to be bound by those idiotic choices, and that's okay. We don't have to worry about that. The rest, money, fear not, or any other fates. Don't worry what the fates dictate. You're going to experience what you need to experience. Other people are going to experience what they need to experience. And as a whole, we're all going to grow from this in one fashion or another. And even if the human species eventually dies off, the human species will have caused enough changes, at least on this one planet, that it will lead to what it needs to lead to, ultimately. That's one component here. Fear not at all. The other thing that I want to mention is going back to chapter 2. And this is related to what I said before, that we are not our bodies. Our body is a vehicle for Hadit to experience the interaction of Nuit and to continue to cause changes, thus Heru-Ra-Ha, right? The end result of those changes. So, quote, "Compassion is the vice of kings. Stamp down the wretched and the weak. This is the law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Think not, O king, upon that lie, that thou must die. Verily thou shalt not die, but live. Now let it be understood, if the body of the king dissolve, he shall remain in pure ecstasy forever. Nuit, Hadit, Ra-hoor-khuit, the sun's strength and sight, light, these are for the servants of the star and the snake." And there's one more quote attached to this, but let me just explain. You can have compassion for people, for things, but what this is saying is to live in a detached state. Whatever actions you take, be confident in them. Don't feel so attached to what's going to happen because of them. Take them because you felt you needed to take them. Let go of the end result. Whatever the end result is, it's already too late for that. You're going to experience that. But try to make the best choices you can based on your nature and your true will. Whatever that is, be conscious of the choices you make. Try to set yourself up as best you can to do your will on a daily basis. Be aware that tomorrow you're going to need to do your will again, so set yourself up today for tomorrow. But things will happen that will sometimes derail that, and that's okay. Be detached in your choices. Be detached in your dictates to yourself and to those that are around you. Whatever you feel you need to say and do, just be confident that that's what you needed to do. Now, we are not our bodies. The body is going to die. And eventually we are going to go back into the source. That is ultimately a fact. That infinite light source, we are going back into that. Whether there's a way out of past that divine light, I don't know. I don't think that we ever go back into the nothingness of the Ein Sof. I believe now that this is here, this is where it is. Now you can remain in that pure state of ecstasy, in that divine light, as a non-incarnate thing beyond things, just one in union with the all. Is it possible to go beyond that? Don't know. Irrelevant at this point. It's like, that's a lofty enough goal, if you ask me. But ultimately, that's what we are. We are that light source. We are that divine light. And so, identifying yourself with your body, yeah, your body's going to die, but you're not going to die because you're not your body. You're not your ego. You're not your sense of self. That light source doesn't have a sense of self. It's not even energy. It's something beyond energy, beyond matter, beyond motion. It's everywhere doing nothing at all times, right? And the other quote that I have connected to this is from chapter 1. So for context, if you're not familiar with the Book of the Law, chapter 1 is Nuit again, and Crowley, penning this, is speaking to Nuit, and she's going to respond to him in this verse. So, quote, "Then saith the prophet and slave of the beauteous one, Who am I, and what shall be the sign? So she answered him, bending down, a lamp in flame of blue, all touching, all penetrant, her lovely hands upon the black earth, and her lithe body arched for love, and her soft feet not hurting the little flowers. Thou knowest, and the sign shall be my ecstasy, the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of my body. So the first part of that is, kind of self-explanatory based on what I said before. It's that Nuit is everywhere, external to you, and from another perspective, you are Nuit, right? A person looking at you is Nuit, and you looking outward, everything outward is Nuit. So she penetrates, right? But even though she's everywhere, she's she's so delicate that she could stand upon the flowers and it's not actually impacting them, right? It's pretty beautiful imagery. But it's really that last part. And the sign shall be my ecstasy, the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of my body. Knowing that we are Hadit and Nuit and Heru-Ra-Ha simultaneously, we are all three components of this book of the law. These deities are as much a part of the human experience as they are of the natural universe. Existence is going to go on. Her body is omnipresent, and we're part of that omnipresence. Right? Even in Egyptian mythology, which is different than Thelema for many different reasons. Even Egyptian mythology, it evolved over time as scientific understanding developed. New concepts were added, old mythologies were partly scrapped. But there was the concept of that solar disk being swallowed by Nuit and rebirthed in the morning. So it's all a recycling of energy. So even if, the spark of light at its highest level, dwelling within you, goes back into the all, the other parts, the physical matter, the tissue, the energy that's in the tissue in your body, that's all going to be regenerated. That's going to go back to the mother. And the mother is going to take that energy and rebirth it, and it's going to take new forms and shapes, and that's going to go on. And so, again, it's like if the body of the king dissolve, he shall remain in pure ecstasy forever. So it's really understanding what this true nature is what I'm trying to communicate. That you are not your body, that you are that light source, and that light source, one, is going to go on in its path, and that your physical body is going to eventually decay and change forms. It's going to change shape, it's going to become something else later on. And that's fine, you don't have to be so attached to the body, which a lot of people are, which is frustrating at times, which causes a lot of calamities, because all greed, anger, whatever, it's all coming from a sense of fear. Fear I don't have enough. Fear somebody hurt me. We get angry because it's a defense mechanism, because we're going to experience pain, and so the anger causes adrenaline, causes a violent response. That's stemming from a sense of fear that your body is going to be harmed. It's a natural process of the body and the brain, but it's still stemming from fear. And so learning how to not be so attached to the body removes that sense of fear. Now, you still need to be alert. That's still a necessary component to life. But to act without being so attached to the outcome. To be in complete control of your emotions. To allow yourself to have emotions, but to know that you are in control of them at the same time. That you could turn them on and you could turn them off as quickly as possible, as needed, is one component. And the other component is knowing that, hey, whatever I need to do, whatever the outcome of that is fine. It's like, I use my life experience because it's what I have at my disposal. It's like, granted, I'm in like a progressive bubble of, the metropolitan New York area where, yeah, I could be trans here, but I could still be attacked. There's a lot of anti-LGBT rather, hatred over here. And so when I made the decision to transition, I very easily could find somebody who wants to do me physical harm one day. I still need to do that. I still need to transition because that's in accordance with my nature and it's my will to do so. So I did it regardless of what the outcome's going to be. If I was in Arkansas, I would have a whole different list of factors that I'd have to deal with, but it'd still be the right thing to do, and I'd still need to transition because that's who I am. I could choose to stay there, I could choose to leave, and each one of those will come with its own set of challenges. But regardless of what the outcome is going to be, even if I'm killed because of an action I take based on my nature and conformity with my will, so be it. I need to do that. Monsieur al-Hallaj was killed because he realized I am the truth. And that was his way of saying, I'm that fucking light source, I am these three components. I am that sun, which is symbolic of the divine light. I am that. And he realized it, and he started telling people, and the people were not ready to hear it, and they killed him because that's where they were at in that part of the world at that time period. And some places are still that violent, and you say something like that, and that will still be the outcome. However many years ago that was till today. But regardless, it's that was his will to utter those words. And those words shaped the lives of a lot of people in a very powerful way. And so that was him doing his will. And sometimes you need to do your will, regardless if this body is going to last doing that will or not. You still need to do it because it's part of your growing process. And it's going to cause changes. And those changes, if they're good changes, and if they're evolving the species and helping people become enlightened, all the fucking better. And I definitely encourage that. So with that, I hope that this unconventional perspective on the Thelemic Pantheon helps a little bit. I'm going to end this here. Love is the law, love under will. Catch y'all on the next one.